The modest home smelled of pine and cinnamon, a soft warmth filling the small rooms as Elise carefully hung homemade ornaments on the Christmas tree. Outside, the snow fell steadily, dusting the world in white as dusk settled over the quiet town. Christmas was just days away, and the decorations, though simple, filled the room with a festive spirit. Elise's heart swelled with both pride and worry as she looked at the tree and then at Anna and Max, her two adopted children, playing on the worn but cozy rug beside her. Money was tight, tighter than ever, and while she had learned to stretch every dollar, there was a particular ache in her chest at the thought of the simple gifts under the tree. But the children, full of giggles and wide-eyed wonder, had no idea. To them, the handmade paper snowflakes and pine cone garlands were magical, and the modest stockings hung by the window were filled with as much love as any store-bought decoration could hold. Elise took a deep breath, reminding herself that love was more valuable than anything that could be bought. This Christmas was about them being together, about the warmth they had created as a family. They had each other, and even on the most difficult days, that had to be enough. "Look, Mama." Anna, her oldest at 6, held up a little painted rock she'd found. "Can this go on the tree?" Elise smiled, taking the rock and turning it in her hand. "I think it's perfect, sweetheart. Just the right touch for our tree." As she tied it to a branch, she glanced at Max, her 4-year-old, who was deeply focused on arranging the nativity scene, mumbling to himself as he made sure each figure had its place. Moments like this were a balm to her worries, and she wished this quiet happiness could last forever. But a strange unease settled over her that night, one she couldn't shake even as the children drifted off to sleep. Standing alone by the dimly lit tree, Elise gazed out the frosted window at the snowy street below. She was thankful, yes, but the weight of her responsibilities pressed on her, filling her heart with a familiar, gnawing ache. The next morning dawned bright and cold, the air crisp and clear as Elise hurried down the street to the small post office. She hoped for some Christmas cards, maybe a holiday flyer for local events, anything cheerful. She was pleasantly surprised to see a thick envelope with her name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Frowning, she tucked it into her bag, figuring she'd read it once she got home. Back in her warm kitchen, she poured herself a cup of tea and opened the envelope, scanning the words carefully. As she read, her breath caught, and her hands began to tremble. The letter was from a private investigator, and the contents were shocking. A man claiming to be Anna and Max's grandfather was searching for them, hoping to connect with his grandchildren. Elise's mind spun as she read the letter again. The words blurred, her heart racing with both fear and anger. How could someone appear now, after she'd spent years raising these children alone, loving them, sacrificing for them? Her mind flashed to the nights she'd held them close, reassuring them that they would always be together, that she would always be there. Mr. Hampton, the man who claimed to be their grandfather, had even left his contact information, urging her to reach out so they could discuss the children's future. The words sent a chill through her, filling her with dread. What did he mean by the children's future? And why did it feel as though he was challenging her place in their lives? She looked over at the children, playing together in the living room, and felt her resolve harden. This man had no right to suddenly come into their lives and disrupt the family they had built together. Elise had been there for Anna and Max through every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every nightmare. She wouldn't let anyone threaten the bond they shared. But the nagging feeling of uncertainty lingered, and Elise couldn't deny the questions that bubbled up inside her. If this man was truly their grandfather, didn't the children have a right to know him? She took a shaky breath, wondering if reaching out would be the right thing to do, even if it meant risking her own heart in the process. As she folded the letter and tucked it away, a wave of fear and uncertainty settled over her. Christmas was supposed to be a time of peace, yet she felt anything but peaceful. The thought of telling the children weighed heavily on her, but she decided for now to keep it to herself. That night, as Elise lay in bed, staring at the faint glow of the Christmas lights outside her window, she resolved to protect her children at all costs. Whatever Mr. Hampton's intentions, they would face them together. And if she had to fight to keep her family together, then fight she would. A few days passed, each one filled with a sense of unease that Elise couldn't shake. She kept the letter hidden away, but it felt like a ticking clock, counting down to something she couldn't quite predict. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the town in a quiet stillness, but her mind raced as she wondered if and when Mr. Hampton might reach out again. Her question was answered on a frosty afternoon just before Christmas Eve. She was busy in the kitchen, baking cookies with Anna and Max, their laughter echoing through the small house. Flour dusted their noses, and the smell of gingerbread filled the air, when suddenly there was a knock at the door. Elise wiped her hands nervously on a dish towel, her heart pounding as she walked toward the door, pulling it open with caution. Standing there, framed by the cold winter light, was a tall man with graying hair and a stern expression. He was impeccably dressed, his coat pristine, his shoes barely touched by the snow. "Elise, I presume." His voice was deep, his gaze steady and assessing. She nodded, feeling as though the world had suddenly tilted. "And you must be Mr. Hampton," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. "I apologize for arriving unannounced, but I wanted to meet my grandchildren before Christmas." He glanced past her, his eyes softening as he caught sight of Anna and Max peeking curiously from behind her. A protective instinct surged through Elise, and she squared her shoulders. "They're my children, Mr. Hampton," she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "I've been raising them for years, and I won't have them treated like strangers." Mr. Hampton's expression remained impassive, though a faint glint of understanding appeared in his eyes. "I respect that, Elise, but I want what's best for them. If that includes you in their lives, so be it. But I would like to be a part of it as well." Elise wanted to tell him to leave, to protect the life she had worked so hard to build. But looking at his face, she sensed a vulnerability hidden beneath the cold exterior, a sense of longing she could not easily dismiss. Against her better judgment, she opened the door wider. "Come in," she said, gesturing to the kitchen where the children had returned to their baking. "But know this, I won't let anyone take them from me." Mr. Hampton nodded and stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the modest, cozy space. As he observed the handmade decorations and the half-decorated tree, a flicker of emotion crossed his face. Elise watched him carefully, wondering what he was truly after. After Mr. Hampton left that evening, Elise felt a strange mix of emotions swirling within her. She had let him see Anna and Max, but she'd kept the visit brief, unwilling to let him get too comfortable in their world. The children had been polite, yet shy, not quite understanding who he was. Elise hadn't offered any explanations, only saying he was a friend. That night, as she lay awake in bed, the weight of the situation pressed down on her. Part of her feared she'd made a terrible mistake by letting him in. She had spent years protecting the children from their painful past, giving them a life filled with love and stability. Now, with Mr. Hampton's sudden appearance, she felt as though everything she had fought to build was slipping away. In the days that followed, her thoughts continued to churn. Every time she looked at Anna and Max, her heart ached. She had raised them, held them through every fever, soothed every nightmare. They were hers, weren't they? Why did it feel as though someone was challenging that truth? Her closest friend, Maggie, a fellow nurse who knew all about her struggles, visited one afternoon. Elise finally shared the story with her, her voice filled with the fear and doubt that had been gnawing at her. "Maggie, I'm afraid I'm not enough for them," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "What if he can offer them more than I ever could?" Maggie took her hands gently. "You're their mother, Elise. Money can't buy love, and it certainly can't replace you. The children need you for the person you are, not for what you can give them. Don't forget that." Elise clung to her friend's words, finding a glimmer of reassurance in them. But her insecurities remained. Despite her best efforts, the idea of Mr. Hampton's wealth and influence hovered over her like a shadow. She spent sleepless nights grappling with the thought that maybe, just maybe, he could offer them a better life. As Christmas approached, Elise knew she couldn't keep hiding the truth from Anna and Max. The children sensed her unease, their curious glances and whispered questions growing more frequent. Finally, on Christmas Eve morning, Elise gathered her courage and sat them down by the fireplace, taking a deep breath. "There's something important I need to tell you both," she began, her voice gentle yet firm. The children looked up at her, their eyes wide with curiosity. "The man who visited the other day, Mr. Hampton," she hesitated, swallowing back a lump of emotion. He's your grandfather." Anna and Max looked at each other, processing this news slowly. Anna, ever the older sister, was the first to speak, her brow furrowed in thought. "But he didn't stay very long." Elise nodded, her heart pounding. "That's because I wanted to make sure you were comfortable. He's here because he wants to know you, and I thought you should have a choice." Max's eyes were thoughtful, a rare intensity in the usually light-hearted boy. "Do we have to go with him, Mama?" The question made her heart ache, but she shook her head. "No, sweetheart. No one is going to take you away. We're a family, and nothing will ever change that. But maybe he could be a part of our family too, if that's something you'd want." The children were quiet, their small faces full of wonder and apprehension. Elise held them close, reassuring them with gentle words, knowing that no matter what Mr. Hampton could offer, the bond they shared as a family was built on love, a love that could never be broken. The day after Christmas, Mr. Hampton returned, and Elise, though hesitant, invited him in. She couldn't deny that the children had asked about him with curiosity, and she wanted to ensure any interaction happened under her watchful eye. Mr. Hampton's demeanor was as reserved as before, but there was a softening in his gaze as he watched the children play with the toys they had received. Simple gifts, yet cherished ones. Once the children ran off to play, Mr. Hampton gestured for Elise to join him at the small dining table. She took a seat, her back straight, and waited, her heart hammering with apprehension. "Elise," he began, his tone formal but not unkind, "I appreciate you allowing me to spend time with Anna and Max. I can see they're happy here with you." He paused, as if weighing his words. "But I believe I could provide them with a life that's more than comfortable." Elise felt the familiar sting of inadequacy, but she forced herself to stay calm. "They have what they need, Mr. Hampton. They have a home, they're loved, and they're cared for." He nodded, acknowledging her words. "I understand that, and I don't mean to diminish your role in their lives. But I'm not offering to take them away from you." He leaned forward, his gaze earnest. "What I'm offering is financial support. Anything they need, education, healthcare, a secure future. I want to be a part of their lives in a way that could ease the burden on you as well." Elise's hands trembled slightly, hidden under the table. It was tempting, oh, so tempting, to accept his offer, to know that she wouldn't have to worry every day about making ends meet. But there was a catch. "And what would you want in return?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Only the chance to see them regularly, to be a grandfather to them. And perhaps, in time, they might stay with me for holidays or weekends," he replied, his tone hopeful. "You would still be their mother, Elise. That would never change." Elise looked down, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She knew that accepting his offer would bring stability to the children's lives, something she had always longed to provide. But she also feared that opening the door for him could lead to more, demands she couldn't refuse, or an eventual push for custody. "I need time to think," she finally said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. Mr. Hampton nodded, a small smile of understanding on his face. "Take all the time you need, Elise. My offer stands." As he left, Elise felt a mixture of relief and dread. She had spent so long being their only support, their only family. Could she really share that role without losing herself in the process? With Mr. Hampton's offer lingering in her mind, Elise threw herself into the final preparations for their Christmas dinner. She tried to focus on the joy and warmth of the season, determined to make it special for Anna and Max. She hung stockings by the small fireplace, added pine cones and ribbons to the tree, and baked a feast that filled the house with delicious smells. Elise couldn't deny that, despite her doubts, Mr. Hampton's presence seemed to have sparked something in the children. They were full of questions about him, wondering aloud what it would be like to have a grandfather in their lives. Anna even made a small card, carefully writing out "Merry Christmas, Grandpa" in her best handwriting. As she watched them giggle and chatter, Elise felt her heart tugged in two directions. She wanted them to have the stability and love they deserved, yet she feared that Mr. Hampton's influence would overshadow her role, especially if he continued to weave his way into their hearts. Late that afternoon, a light snow began to fall, covering the streets in a fresh white layer. Elise was setting the table when a knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, Mr. Hampton stood on the porch, holding a gift-wrapped box and wearing a look that was both nervous and hopeful. "May I join you for Christmas dinner?" he asked, his voice softer than she heard before. "I brought something for Anna and Max." Caught off guard, Elise hesitated, glancing back at the children, who were already racing to the door with eager smiles. She knew what her heart wanted, to keep their family small, safe, and predictable. But looking at the children's excitement, she felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble. "Come in, Mr. Hampton," she said quietly, stepping aside. The children were thrilled, bouncing around him with laughter and questions as they showed off the tree, the stockings, and their favorite ornaments. Mr. Hampton's stiff posture softened, and Elise watched as he kneeled to their level, listening intently as they chattered on, his eyes bright with genuine warmth. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant, filled with laughter and stories. Mr. Hampton shared memories of his own Christmases growing up, the grand gatherings, and the way the whole family would come together for the season. Elise could see the sparkle in Anna and Max's eyes as they listened, captivated by the tales of tradition and family history. After dinner, Mr. Hampton presented them with his gift, a set of classic storybooks, each one beautifully illustrated. The children were overjoyed, flipping through the pages with awe, and Elise couldn't help but feel a pang of gratitude for his thoughtfulness. As the evening wore on, the children began to tire, and Elise tucked them into bed, returning to find Mr. Hampton lingering by the door, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you for inviting me, Elise," he said, his voice filled with genuine warmth. "It meant more to me than you know." Elise nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words. "They deserve to know their family, and you seem to care for them deeply." He smiled, and for a brief moment, the mask of formality fell away, revealing a man who had his own regrets and fears. "I do. I regret not being there sooner, not knowing about them, but I want to make up for that now." As he left, Elise felt a strange mixture of hope and sadness. She could see the love in his eyes for Anna and Max, and she knew he wanted to be a part of their lives. But in letting him in, she feared she might lose a part of her own place in their hearts. Alone by the tree, Elise gazed at the twinkling lights, feeling the gravity of the decision that lay ahead. She knew that no matter what she chose, their family would never be quite the same. Elise's days grew more complicated as the holiday season wore on. Although she tried to focus on work and caring for Anna and Max, thoughts of Mr. Hampton and his offer lingered. The more she thought about it, the more memories from her own childhood surfaced, memories she had long tried to bury. Growing up, Elise hadn't known the stability or warmth she worked so hard to provide for Anna and Max. Her own family had been fractured and tumultuous, marked by inconsistency and abandonment. She had been left to fend for herself early on, and that history had instilled a deep fear of loss and loneliness. She had promised herself that she would give her children a different kind of life, a life where they would feel safe, loved, and valued. These memories haunted her, especially in quiet moments when the house was still and she was alone with her thoughts. She hadn't spoken to anyone about her past, not even Maggie. But the burden weighed heavily on her heart, forcing her to confront old wounds she'd hidden for so long. On a chilly afternoon, Maggie came over with a tray of Christmas cookies, sensing Elise needed some company. They sat together in the living room, sipping hot cocoa, as Maggie studied her with a concerned look. "Elise, you seem so distracted," Maggie began gently. "Is everything all right?" Elise hesitated, but the concern in her friend's eyes softened her resolve. She took a deep breath and began sharing the story of her difficult past, revealing the scars she'd tried so hard to hide. "I guess I'm scared, Maggie," Elise admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared I won't be enough for them, that they'll look at Mr. Hampton's wealth, his ability to give them so much more than I ever could, and they'll realize I have nothing compared to that." Maggie reached out, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "Elise, you have everything they need. You give them love, stability, and a home. Money can't replace a mother's love. Mr. Hampton may be able to buy them things, but he can never give them what you have." Elise nodded, feeling a spark of comfort in her friend's words, but the fear lingered. Despite her resolve, a small voice within her continued to whisper doubts, reminding her of the fractured childhood she had endured and the fear of losing the only family she'd ever truly known. A few days after her talk with Maggie, Mr. Hampton called to arrange another visit with the children. Elise agreed, deciding it was better to keep their interactions open and honest, especially if it would help her understand his intentions. They arranged to meet at a local cafe, where the children could enjoy a hot chocolate and Mr. Hampton could spend time with them. When they arrived, Mr. Hampton was already waiting, his stern face softening as he spotted Anna and Max. The children ran to him eagerly, their faces lighting up as he greeted them warmly. Elise couldn't deny the warmth in her heart as she watched him laugh and smile with them, listening intently to their stories and sharing a few of his own. After a while, the children became engrossed in a nearby display of Christmas decorations, leaving Elise and Mr. Hampton alone at the table. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken tension and questions. "Thank you for letting me see them," he said quietly, his gaze fixed on his grandchildren. "I didn't know they existed until recently. It's one of my biggest regrets, not being there for them from the start." Elise studied him, noting the sadness in his eyes. For the first time, she saw not a wealthy, imposing figure, but a man who seemed genuinely remorseful. Her heart softened, even as her protective instincts remained strong. "Why didn't you know?" she asked, her voice softer than before. "If you cared so much about family, why didn't you search for them sooner?" Mr. Hampton sighed, his gaze lowering. "My relationship with their mother was complicated. We were estranged, and when she left, I didn't know where she went. By the time I found out she had passed away, I didn't realize she had left behind children." He paused, his expression clouded with regret. "It took time, but I eventually hired someone to investigate, and that's how I found you." Elise felt a pang of empathy, remembering her own fears and feelings of inadequacy. Though she still had reservations, she could see that his intentions were sincere. He wasn't here to take the children from her, but to be a part of their lives, to make amends for the years he had missed. "I won't let anyone take them from me," she said, her voice steady but not unkind. "I've spent years building a life for them, giving them the love and stability they deserve. I would never put them in a situation where that was at risk." Mr. Hampton nodded, his expression one of understanding. "I wouldn't expect you to. They deserve to be with the person who loves them most. I just want a chance to know them, to give them the support they deserve, even if it's from a distance." As the children returned to the table, Elise watched the way Mr. Hampton's face lit up, his eyes following them with a look of deep affection. She began to understand that perhaps his role in their lives didn't have to be a threat to her own. Perhaps, in time, they could both be a part of the family they deserved. As Christmas Eve approached, Elise was still unsure about what her next steps should be. The children seemed to have embraced Mr. Hampton's presence, their curiosity about him blossoming into a shy fondness. She could sense their growing attachment, and with each passing day, her own fears began to ease, if only a little. The town had its annual Christmas Eve festival that evening, and Elise thought it would be a perfect opportunity for Mr. Hampton to join them in a more relaxed, public setting. She knew it would mean a lot to the children to have him there, and if she was honest, it might give her a chance to see him in a different light. When they arrived at the town square, lights twinkled against the evening sky, casting a warm glow over the snow-covered ground. Christmas carols filled the air, and the scent of hot cocoa and roasted chestnuts drifted through the crowd. Anna and Max's excitement was infectious as they clutched her hands, their eyes wide with wonder. Mr. Hampton arrived shortly after, looking slightly out of place in his formal coat amidst the festive crowd. But when Anna and Max rushed over to him, his face softened, and he bent down to greet them, accepting their eager hugs with a chuckle. Elise watched from a distance, marveling at how naturally he seemed to fit into their world. They walked through the festivities together, stopping at each stall and attraction. Mr. Hampton surprised Elise with his gentle patience, listening attentively to the children's every word, buying them small treats, and even trying his hand at a game booth, much to Anna and Max's delight. Elise found herself smiling despite her earlier fears, a warmth spreading through her as she witnessed their joy. Later, as snow began to fall lightly, they gathered around the grand Christmas tree in the center of the square, joining in the carol singing. Mr. Hampton stood beside Elise, his expression content and peaceful as he watched his grandchildren's faces light up with wonder. "Thank you, Elise," he murmured quietly, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "This evening has been more than I could have imagined." Elise glanced at him, her heart softening. "They're happy to have you here, and I can see that you truly care about them. That means a lot to me." They shared a quiet moment, standing side by side as the carols filled the night air. For the first time, Elise felt that perhaps they could truly find a way to be a family, a sense of reconciliation settling over her heart like the soft snow that blanketed the town. Christmas morning dawned clear and bright, the sun casting a golden glow over the snow-covered landscape. Elise woke early to prepare breakfast, smiling as she heard the children's excited whispers from the living room. She had a few simple gifts under the tree, and she hoped they would bring joy despite their modesty. As she set the table, she heard a knock on the door. She opened it to find Mr. Hampton standing there, a small, carefully wrapped package in his hands. "Good morning, Elise," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "I wanted to stop by and give the children something special. If that's all right with you." Elise nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "Of course. They'd love to see you." Anna and Max rushed over as soon as they saw him, their faces lighting up as he handed them the gift. They tore the wrapping paper excitedly, revealing a beautiful set of classic storybooks with gold embossed covers. Each book was carefully chosen, filled with fairy tales and adventures they could lose themselves in for hours. "Oh, Grandpa, they're beautiful," Anna exclaimed, hugging him tightly, while Max flipped through the pages with awe. Elise felt her heart warm as she watched the scene, her earlier reservations melting away. She could see the care and thoughtfulness Mr. Hampton had put into the gift, and she realized how much it meant to him to be part of their lives. After breakfast, the children settled in with their new books, content to read by the fire. Mr. Hampton lingered, his gaze drifting to the Christmas tree adorned with handmade ornaments and little pine cones the children had collected. He seemed thoughtful, his eyes soft as he took in the small yet cozy home Elise had created. "May I speak with you, Elise?" he asked, his tone respectful yet serious. She nodded, leading him into the kitchen, away from the children's curious ears. They sat across from each other, the warmth of the kitchen contrasting with the intensity of the conversation they both knew was coming. "I want you to know," he began, his voice low, "that I respect what you've built here. The love, the warmth, it's something money can't buy. I may have wealth, but I see now that they need more than that. They need a mother who loves them, who is there for them." Elise felt a wave of relief wash over her, her heart settling as he continued. "However, I would still like to be a part of their lives. Not to replace you or disrupt what you've given them, but to contribute in whatever way I can. If that means visiting occasionally, supporting their education, or helping with other expenses, then that's what I'd like to do." Elise's eyes softened, and for the first time, she allowed herself to fully trust him. "Thank you, Mr. Hampton. I think we can find a way to make this work. They deserve to know you, and I appreciate what you're offering." They shook hands, a silent agreement passing between them. For the first time, Elise felt the burden of her fears lifting, replaced by a tentative hope for the future. As Mr. Hampton prepared to leave, he turned back to her, his face serious but kind. "And, Elise, please call me Charles." She smiled, nodding. "Thank you, Charles. And Merry Christmas." They shared a final, genuine smile before he stepped out into the morning light. Watching him go, Elise felt a sense of peace settle over her heart. She had found a way to give Anna and Max the best of both worlds, a mother's love and a family's support. For the rest of the day, the children played and read by the fire, their laughter filling the house. And for the first time in a long time, Elise felt that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. As the days passed after Christmas, Elise watched as Anna and Max grew increasingly attached to their grandfather. They called him Grandpa now, their bond forming naturally as they shared stories, laughter, and even secrets. Elise's heart swelled with pride and relief, grateful that her children were finally experiencing a connection with family beyond their little home. One afternoon, Elise found herself sitting with Mr. Hampton, Charles, in her cozy living room as the children played nearby. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow across the room, and for the first time, Elise felt comfortable with him there. Charles cleared his throat, breaking the comfortable silence. "Elise, I want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of their lives. I know this hasn't been easy for you." Elise smiled, her gaze drifting to the children. "At first, I was afraid that I'd lose them to you. But now I see that I was wrong. You love them as much as I do, and I think we're giving them something really special." Charles nodded, a look of deep gratitude in his eyes. "They have a wonderful mother, Elise, and that's something I could never replace. My only wish now is to support you in any way I can." Elise felt a pang of relief, her worries finally dissipating. "Thank you, Charles. I think we're creating something good here, a bond that goes beyond blood." They shared a warm, understanding smile, and Elise realized she no longer saw him as an outsider or a threat. Charles had become part of their family, and she felt grateful that her children could know both her love and his support. The new year was just around the corner when a letter arrived at Elise's doorstep. The return address was from a lawyer's office, and Elise's stomach twisted as she opened it, her hands trembling. The letter was from Charles's attorney, stating that preliminary custody papers had been drawn up in his name. The implications hit her like a cold wave, flooding her with anger, betrayal, and fear. Elise clutched the letter tightly, her mind racing. After everything they had shared, all the trust she had built, this was how he intended to repay her? She could hardly believe it. She fought to control her breathing as her heart pounded painfully, the idea of losing her children clawing at her insides. Without hesitation, Elise stormed over to Charles's house, anger boiling inside her as she rang his doorbell. When he opened the door, he was taken aback by the fierce look in her eyes, his brow furrowing as he took in her tense expression. "Elise, what's wrong?" "This," she said, thrusting the letter at him. "What is the meaning of this?" Charles looked at the letter, his face paling as he read the contents. He closed his eyes, sighing deeply before meeting her gaze. "Elise, I didn't authorize this. I didn't even know they'd drawn up these papers. This wasn't my intention." "Then why did this arrive at my door?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "After all we've been through, Charles, how could you let this happen?" Charles's face softened, his gaze filled with remorse. "Elise, I'm truly sorry. I had a preliminary discussion with my lawyer months ago, before we really got to know each other. He must have taken it upon himself to move forward, assuming I wanted custody. I promise you, this wasn't my decision." She watched his expression closely, and slowly, she could see the sincerity in his eyes. The anger and betrayal began to ebb away, replaced by a tentative understanding. Charles reached out, his voice soft. "Please believe me, Elise. I would never take them from you. You're their mother, and no one could ever replace that. I only want to be a part of their lives, not disrupt what you've created." Elise took a shaky breath, nodding slowly as her emotions settled. "All right, Charles. I'll believe you. but this needs to be handled. I can't have these kinds of misunderstandings putting my family at risk." "Absolutely," he said, his tone firm. "I'll meet with my lawyer immediately and make it clear that you are, and always will be, their mother. No more custody talks, only support, as we agreed." With the weight of his reassurance, Elise felt a wave of relief. She knew this experience had tested the foundation of their newfound family, and she was grateful they had faced it together, emerging stronger. As she left, she felt a newfound strength, comforted by the realization that her family was secure and that Charles truly respected her role as the children's mother. Days after the incident with the custody letter, Charles reached out to Elise, requesting a meeting. He suggested a quiet spot at the town's small park, where the snow had settled thickly, transforming the trees and benches into a winter wonderland. Reluctant yet hopeful, Elise agreed, meeting him there one crisp morning while the children played at a distance. As they walked along the snowy path, Charles spoke quietly, his gaze focused on the ground ahead. "Elise, I owe you an apology. I regret not only the misunderstanding with the custody papers, but also the assumptions I made about you in the beginning. I saw your financial struggles and doubted that you could give the children a stable future. I couldn't see then what I understand now, that what you give them goes beyond anything I could ever provide." Elise walked beside him, her heart softening as he continued. "You've given them a foundation built on love, and I was too blind to see that. I thought money was the answer, that it could solve everything, but I was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry for any pain I've caused you." His sincerity and humility touched her deeply. She could see how difficult it was for him to admit his faults, and she felt a surge of compassion. "Thank you, Charles," she replied softly, pausing to look him in the eye. "It means a lot that you're here, owning up to it. I know you only wanted what's best for Anna and Max, and in a way, I understand why you thought money could help." They walked in silence for a while, each lost in thought. Finally, Charles stopped, taking a deep breath before speaking again. "Elise, I want to make amends, not with grand gestures or money, but with time and patience. I want to be here for you and the children, supporting you in any way I can. No more misunderstandings, just family." Elise felt tears prick her eyes as she looked at him. "I'd like that too, Charles. I think we can find a way to be a family, one that's built on trust." They shared a quiet smile, a newfound understanding passing between them. Elise realized that Charles was no longer the imposing figure she'd once feared. He was just a man, a grandfather, who wanted to make things right, and for the first time, she believed that they could build something meaningful together. The new year arrived with a fresh blanket of snow, bringing with it a renewed sense of hope. Elise felt lighter than she had in years, as though the burdens she'd carried were finally lifted. Her relationship with Charles had become one of mutual respect, and their family felt whole in a way she'd never imagined. One bright morning, Elise and Charles decided to surprise the children by taking them sledding at the nearby park. The children's laughter echoed through the frosty air as they flew down the hill, their cheeks flushed with joy. Elise and Charles watched from the top, sharing a smile as they took in the sight of Anna and Max's pure, unbridled happiness. After a morning of sledding, they returned home, where Elise made hot cocoa and warm soup. They gathered around a kitchen table, sharing stories, laughter, and dreams for the future. Charles had even brought along a small, thoughtful gift for Elise, a family photo album he'd put together, filled with pictures of the children and new snapshots he'd taken during their recent outings. Elise carefully turned each page, her heart swelling with gratitude as she looked at the memories they had created together. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. For the first time, she felt truly seen and valued, not just as a mother, but as a part of something larger, a family that included Charles. As the day came to an end, they gathered in the living room, where the last of the Christmas lights twinkled softly in the evening light. Charles sat by the fire, reading one of the new storybooks to Anna and Max, his voice warm and soothing. Elise watched them from her favorite armchair, her heart full and content. In that moment, she knew that they had found a new balance, a way to honor the past while embracing the future. Charles had become an integral part of their lives, not because of his wealth or status, but because of his willingness to grow, to apologize, and to be there for them in meaningful ways. As she listened to the children's soft giggles and watched Charles's gentle smile, Elise realized that her fears had finally dissolved. She had found a family built on love, respect, and trust, one that would carry them forward into the future with strength and unity. As the weeks turned into months, a rhythm developed in their lives. Charles became a regular part of their days, visiting often and participating in family traditions that had once been only for Elise, Anna, and Max. The children flourished with the support of both their mother and grandfather, growing more confident and joyful with each passing day. One sunny afternoon in early spring, Elise and Charles took the children to a nearby nature reserve. The park was bursting with color, the trees dotted with blossoms, and the grass a vibrant green. Anna and Max ran ahead, chasing butterflies and laughing as the gentle breeze tousled their hair. Elise watched them, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She turned to Charles, who stood beside her, a contented smile on his face as he watched his grandchildren play. There was a quiet understanding between them now, a sense of companionship that had grown over time. As they walked, Charles shared more about his past, revealing stories of his own childhood, his struggles, and his mistakes. Elise listened, realizing that despite their differences, they had both faced similar challenges. They had both been shaped by hardship and were bound by a mutual desire to protect and nurture the next generation. Elise, Charles said, his voice quiet, I used to think that family was about bloodlines and legacy. But now, I see it's so much more than that. It's about the people who show up, who love you, and who fight for you. You've taught me that. Elise looked at him, a soft smile on her face. I think we've both learned a lot, and I'm grateful that the children have you in their lives. I never expected to share this journey with anyone, but I wouldn't want it any other way. They walked in comfortable silence, the weight of past misunderstandings and fears finally lifted. For the first time, they were a family in every sense of the word, one that chose each other, supported each other, and found strength in their shared love for Anna and Max. As the year continued on, Elise, Charles, Anna, and Max settled into a new chapter of their lives. Charles began volunteering at the town's children's center, hoping to make a positive impact on the lives of other children as well. His experience with his grandchildren had softened him, and he wanted to give back to the community, finding purpose beyond his wealth. Elise saw the changes in Charles, and she admired his dedication and newfound compassion. She felt a sense of pride, knowing that they had both grown and changed through their journey together. Their family gatherings became a source of joy, filled with laughter, stories, and the warmth that comes from genuine connection. One evening, as they gathered for a family dinner, Elise noticed a sense of quiet satisfaction in Charles's expression as he watched the children talk excitedly about their day. He looked at Peace, a man who had found a deeper purpose and connection that he'd never anticipated. As dinner wound down, Charles cleared his throat and looked at Elise, his eyes warm with gratitude. Elise, I wanted to say thank you for trusting me, for giving me a chance to be part of your lives. You've given me something I never knew I needed. Elise smiled, her eyes misty with emotion. Thank you, Charles, for showing up. I never thought we'd be here, but I'm grateful we are. You're a wonderful grandfather to Anna and Max, and I can't imagine our family without you. The children, sensing the moment, wrapped their arms around both Elise and Charles, their laughter filling the room. In that moment, their family felt complete, held together not by blood or wealth, but by love, acceptance, and the resilience they had all shown. As they looked toward the future, Elise felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew that they would face challenges and joys alike, but they would do it together. They had built a family that would stand the test of time, bound by the strength of their commitment to one another and the love they shared. As the year drew to a close, Elise reflected on the incredible transformation her life had taken since Mr. Hampton, Charles, had appeared at her door. What had once seemed like an impossible situation had grown into something extraordinary. She had gained not only a loving grandfather for Anna and Max, but also a friend and confidant in Charles. Together, they had built a foundation of trust and unity that would guide them for years to come. On a snowy winter afternoon, they all gathered at Charles's house for a small celebration, a new tradition they were building together as a family. The house was warm and welcoming, decorated with lights and garlands, with a roaring fire casting a soft glow over the room. Anna and Max were busy playing with the family dog in the living room, their laughter filling the space with joy. As Elise and Charles watched them, they couldn't help but feel a shared sense of pride. The children had grown so much in the past year, blossoming under the love and support they had found in their new family dynamic. Charles turned to Elise, his expression serious but kind. "You know, Elise, I never imagined I'd be this happy. I thought my life was complete, that I had everything I needed. But now I realize that family isn't about what you have. It's about who you have." Elise smiled, her heart full. "I feel the same way, Charles. I always thought I could do it alone, that I had to, but now I see that having you here has made us all stronger. We're a family, one that's unbreakable." They shared a quiet, contented moment as they watched Anna and Max, knowing that their love and commitment to each other had forged a bond that would endure. Whatever challenges the future might bring, they were ready to face them together, bound by the strength of their unbreakable family. As the snow continued to fall outside, Elise felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. Their family journey, though unexpected, had led them to a place of love and fulfillment that she hadn't believed possible. The challenges they had faced had only strengthened their bonds, creating a sense of purpose and unity that would guide them forward. They gathered around the fireplace, each of them sharing a cherished memory from the past year. Anna talked about her favorite day at the park with her grandpa, while Max recounted the time they had all gone sledding together. Charles shared how he had learned to be a better man, a better grandfather, thanks to the family they had all created together. Finally, it was Elise's turn. She looked around at her family, her heart full of gratitude and pride. "My favorite memory is right here, right now, with all of you. I never thought life could bring me this much happiness, this much love. I'm so grateful to each of you for making our family what it is." As they shared hugs and smiles, Elise realized that the family she had built was stronger than anything she had ever dreamed. They had faced their fears, made sacrifices, and ultimately found a path that was uniquely theirs. Charles had brought them the support they needed, and Elise's love had provided the foundation. Together, they had created a family that was resilient, loving, and above all, unbreakable. As the evening wore on, they all gathered around to read one of the storybooks Charles had given Anna and Max the previous Christmas. The children's eyes sparkled as they listened, their faces lit by the fire's warm glow. Elise leaned back, feeling a profound sense of peace. As the final pages were turned, she knew that, while this chapter of their lives had come to a close, their story was only beginning. Whatever the future held, they would face it together as a family built not by chance, but by choice and love. Hey, everyone. If you enjoyed the story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It really helps us bring more stories to life. Also, we'd love to know, what part of the story had the biggest impact on you? Was it the moment when Elise had to confront her deepest fears, or when the family finally came together as one? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, we're always looking for new ideas. If there's a story theme or scenario you'd love to see on the channel, let us know in the comments. Your suggestions might just inspire our next story. Thanks for being here, and we can't wait to see your thoughts and ideas.